Okay, so I promised we were going to talk about behaviorism next. Yay! So the idea of behaviorism is that psychologists were sort of sick of Freud's idea of the unconscious and this part of your mind that is influencing your behavior so much, and yet we can't see it, we can't prove it's there. Psychoanalysts who followed Freud believed, they would do things like, I interpret your dream as meaning this is going on in your unconscious, because they were big into dream interpretation. This is going on in your unconscious and it means X, Y, and Z. And then the client would say, well, no, I don't agree with that. I don't think that's an issue for me at all. And the psychoanalyst would say, well, that's because you are transferring your personal issues onto me, and if you weren't doing that, you would agree with what I had to say. So there was no way for the client to be right. And as a matter of fact, they didn't call them clients, they called them patients. You're sick, you need an expert to help you, you don't know what you're talking about. Sort of like what modern doctors do to people. Like, oh, you Googled that on your own, you asked Dr. Google for help, like you're an idiot and you can't do a little bit of research on your own. So that's basically how Freudian psychologists treated people. Maybe they didn't, not all of them treated them badly, but there was sort of this idea that I'm the expert, you don't know what you're talking about, and if you disagree with me, that just proves how screwed up you are. So there was no way anybody could win against what a psychoanalyst had to say, but there's also no way you could prove what the psychoanalyst was saying was right. Additionally, therapy was basically lifelong. So you could be in psychoanalysis with a Freudian therapist for the rest of your life without necessarily doing any better, and that was just sort of what was expected, which of course is ridiculous. That's not helpful at all, and it's really expensive. So behaviorism came along in the 30s and really got its full stride in the, probably I'd say the 60s was when it really started fighting against Freudian psychoanalysis. And it said that sorry, I'm rocking the camera all over the place. We should be making our decisions, we should be doing our research and deciding if this works based on the behavior of the patient. So if you have depression going on inside, we can see that through your behavior, because depressed people aren't happily going through life. There's certain symptoms of depression. If your child is having behavioral issues, then we can count how many times a kid pulls their sister's hair or spits at a teacher or gets into a fight. And then if my treatment is working, we can then see that the amount of times these bad behaviors are occurring is decreasing. And also, if I change your behavior, then according to behaviorists, it should change your mind. And that is actually true. So for instance, if you suffer from depression, and instead of treating your depression, I could just say, make a list of all of the things in life that would make you happy. Like, what things could you do that, if you weren't depressed, would make you happy? And so maybe going to the beach, reading a book, taking a bubble bath, watching a comedy. And then I say, well, just start doing those things. Don't worry about not being depressed. Just start doing those things that would make you happy if you weren't depressed. And surprise, surprise, that actually alleviates depression. So simply by changing your behavior, your mental state changes along with that as well. So like I said in the last video, behaviorists believe we were born a tabula rasa, we're a blank slate. John B. Watson said, give me 10 kids and I can turn them into whatever I want. A lawyer, a beggar, a thief, a scientist, whatever I want. Based on changing their environment, I can make that child into anything. All right, so we know that there's two types of learning that were made famous. So classical conditioning and operant conditioning. There are other types of learning as well. There's observational learning, there's social learning, and so on. But classical and operant conditioning are the two big ones. And these are associative learning. I'm learning through association. Classical conditioning is I'm learning through associating just two random things with each other. And operant conditioning is I am associating a behavior with a consequence. So let's go through classical conditioning first. So if you were to open a can of cat food, what is your cat going to do? Well, if it's like my cats, as soon as they hear that can opening, they come running towards you because they know that that sound means I'm going to be fed. Now, if you have a feral cat that has never been around people and they hear the sound of a can opening, they will just ignore you because they have not learned that that sound means anything. It's just a sound. They might be curious. They might wonder if it signifies anything, but they have not paired that sound with any meaning yet. Whereas the house cat knows through experience that that sound means I'm about to be fed. So they'll respond not to the food, but to the sound that signifies food is about to come. That's classical conditioning. Now, this was discovered by Ivan Pavlov. He was a Russian physiologist who was studying digestion in dogs, so he was not actually a psychologist. And I'll go through the components later. So basically what he was doing is he was giving food to the dog would drool. He was measuring how much salivation the dog had when the dog was fed. But over time, he realized that the dog would start to drool before he had food, and then the dog would drool when somebody even walked into the lab. So he started experimenting with like what are the different sorts of things that the dog will react to, and he found sounds, lights, any stimulus could cause a response of drooling in the dog. So this is what we call classical conditioning. All right, so let me just back up to the components, okay? So you have a stimulus and a response. A stimulus is anything that triggers a response in an organism. Then we have two terms, unconditioned and conditioned. Unconditioned means the natural state. So like before you've conditioned your hair, it's in its natural frizzy, tangly state, which is why my hair is in a bun right now, because it is in its unconditioned state. Conditioned means now I have gone through all the process of getting it trained into a desired state. Same thing if you're an athlete. So if you're unconditioned, then that means you are in your weak, non-athletic state. And then you go through conditioning in order to train your body to do whatever sport that you're in. So unconditioned means natural, conditioned means trained or taught. All right, so in Pavlov's experiment, the food was an unconditioned stimulus. Food naturally causes a reflexive response in any organism. If I have a pizza, and you smell the pizza or see the pizza or even think about the pizza, then you will probably start drooling, assuming you like pizza, or assuming you're hungry enough. If you're hungry enough, you'll basically eat anything. So you don't have to be trained to salivate in response to food. It is a natural, reflexive, instinctual, you could say, reaction. As a kid, you probably played the game I Can Make You Blink, and you do things like try to make the person blink. You don't need to be trained to blink if some object is coming towards your eyeballs at a rapid speed. That is just a natural reflex that we are born with. Okay, so unconditioned means natural. An unconditioned stimulus is something that naturally causes a natural response in a person. So for the dog, the food naturally caused the response of drooling. The tone, in this case, you see this is a tuning fork, but it could be a bell. That's the classic thing that he used was a bell. And if you ring the bell, then you don't naturally start drooling. There's no reason, why would you drool just because of the sound of a bell? Or tapping. Did you start drooling? Probably not. It doesn't mean anything to you, at least not without training. So this is what we call a neutral stimulus. It's meaningless, it's neutral. It doesn't do anything to anybody, like Switzerland. Then we have training taking place. So this is when you are conditioned. So now if I tap this and then give you a piece of pizza, and I do that over and over again, pretty soon all you have to hear is, and then you'll start drooling. You'll start thinking about pizza, and you might be mad at me if I don't have a pizza for you. So the neutral stimulus is paired with the unconditioned stimulus. So the bell is sounded, food is given. Bell is sounded, food is given. Spoon is tapped, pizza is given. So this neutral stimulus eventually means something. So now when conditioning has taken place, this is now a conditioned stimulus. You've been trained for this stimulus to mean something. It's not neutral anymore. So the neutral stimulus becomes conditioned stimulus. So now that this means pizza is coming, I don't actually need the pizza in order to make you drool, right? I can cut the pizza out, the food out entirely, and all I have to do is ring the bell or tap the spoon to get drooling. So eventually the conditioned stimulus causes a conditioned response. So you would not normally drool just because a piece of metal is tapped. You wouldn't normally think of pizza just because I tap a spoon. The dog wouldn't normally think of dog food when a bell is rung. So now it's a conditioned response. It required training. It's not reflexive and natural. Okay, so this is how I do sort of like a chart that I made up for classical conditioning that I wish my teachers had given me something like this when I took a psychology class. So hopefully it will help you. So you put the neutral stimulus at the top. And in this case, we'll just go with the Pavlov example. It's a bell, okay? And then put a little line underneath that. And then you do the unconditioned stimulus and the unconditioned response. So in this situation, what was the natural stimulus that caused a response in the dog? Was it the bell? Did the bell cause any response at the very, very beginning? No. Did the food cause a response? Yes. Okay, so the food is a stimulus because it caused a response. And what was the response? Drooling. The dog drooled. Okay? So that's the unconditioned stimulus and the response. This is reflexive. Okay? It's a reflexive response. It does not require any training. Then you have the conditioned stimulus and the conditioned response. So what training took place in order to cause conditioning? Well, Pavlov rang a bell, he gave food. Rang a bell, gave food. So that is what we call the pairing. So the pairing was bell plus food. Okay? That was what learning took place. So now that the dog knows the bell means food is coming, you can actually cut food out entirely. Let's see, right there. Okay? So we don't need food anymore to cause a response in the dog. Now all you need to do is ring the bell and the dog drools without any food involved in this whatsoever. So after pairing, or you could also call it conditioning, takes place, now you cut out the food, you cut out the unconditioned stimulus, and the bell, the neutral stimulus, okay, the neutral stimulus takes the place of food as the conditioned stimulus, because that's the whole point, is that you want something that was originally neutral to now have meaning. That's the point of classical conditioning. Not that it's always done on purpose, but sometimes, like training a dog, it would be done on purpose. So let's think of another example. Let's think of something politically charged right now. Negativity towards minorities. Okay, so that is a classical conditioning thing. So does being a minority mean anything? Like if you've never seen a minority before in your life, if you grew up, or a person of any race, doesn't really matter if it's a minority or not, but if you're black and you grew up in Africa centuries ago and you've never seen a white person, or if you're white and you've never seen anybody else, or Asian, whatever, and you've never seen anybody else, would that mean anything to you? No. You'd be curious, you might be amazed, but there's not really a meaning towards it. It's just an interesting thing that you've come across. So skin color is a neutral stimulus. There's no meaning towards skin color. So how does skin color come to mean something? And what does skin color mean today? We might say certain skin colors create, a negative response. Okay, you think of certain people negatively, or at least if you're racist or bigoted, whatever, you would think of people negatively. And of course, you could also think the other way positively, but we'll get to that later. So what would cause you to naturally think of somebody in a negative manner? Obviously, the first time you see somebody with black skin or white skin or brown skin or all the various shades of it, you're not going to automatically think, oh, that's a terrible person, I don't like them. So what happens is you have a bad experience, or somebody tells you they're bad. The media, your parents, society, whatever group you're part of, your friends. So they say that person's bad, or you have a bad experience with them, and now you have negative feelings towards them. And we do something called generalization, right there, where we tend to generalize our feelings towards one thing to lots of others. We'll get into that more later, but anyhow. So you have a bad experience, somebody tells you somebody is bad or something is bad. Obviously, your natural response is going to be negativity. So now you pair skin color, okay, with, let's just make this simple. Somebody told you they're bad. So you pair skin color with being told they're bad. Here's a black person, Mexican person, white person, whatever. They're bad. You see that person right there? They're bad people. You see the other one? Bad person. So eventually, now pairing has taken place. So now you associate. Every time you see that skin color, you think you have a negative response. That's a bad person, you feel negatively towards them. You see them, that's a bad person, you feel negatively. So now what is the conditioned stimulus in this? Do you have to be told that that person is bad in order to have a negative response? No, you just see skin color, and that, without needing to be told anything now you have negative response towards them, okay? That's all it takes. So now you've been classically conditioned. As soon as you see that skin color, you have bad feelings towards the person. And that's how racism starts. You could also, let's see, I'll just do this. Now, my sister is engaged to a black guy, and her children, being black, when they were born, my niece and nephew, Nora and Ryan, when they were born, black skin it's neutral. It doesn't mean anything in and of itself. However, these complicated ones always get me mixed up. That's why it's so important to do this chart, because even your professor has a hard time sometimes thinking this through, so the chart is helpful. So their Papa, as he's called. So they see Papa, okay? They see him, that's the stimulus, and he treats them well. Oh wait. Let's make it simple. He treats them well, and their response is positive, okay? They love him. They adore him, he's wonderful. He's a nice guy. So he treats them well, they have a positive response. He treats them well again, they have a positive response. Great. That's natural. If somebody treats you well, all of us are going to feel positively towards that person. Now what gets paired? Okay, so now he has black skin, and how did I do this before? So food, bell, food, drawing, bell, and food. Right. So black skin. Yeah, okay. I'm thinking this right. He treats them well. See, it's really important to do this chart. I'm telling you, I have a PhD in this, and it's still I still have to think it through. Okay? So this is just association. Obviously, he's not pointing out every time he treats the kids well. He doesn't say, oh, hey, guess what? I'm also black. He just happens, it's paired. It's just that is how it is. There's other things that he's associating them with too. For instance, he's a police officer. So they have a positive attitude, probably a more positive attitude than I have towards police. He's a certain height, he does his hair a certain way, he looks a certain way, like facial features, he's clean shaven. I mean, all of these things are also being paired with he treats them well. Okay, so it's not just skin color, but that's just what we're going with here. So skin color, which originally meant nothing to them, now means something. Okay? So he just happens to be black, but he treats them well. So now just seeing black people they have a positive response. Okay? They actually, her son, when he was little, he said he was going to grow up to be black, which was funny because you can't exactly do that, but now he just wants to marry somebody who's black. So yeah, they love black people. Okay, so that's just a classical conditioning thing that they did. We didn't specifically try to raise them. You know, it wasn't like something that was consciously done, but simply because my sister's fiance is black, they developed a positive attitude towards those who are black, which is great, right? That's what we want to have happen with hopefully every skin color. So, but you can see how really, really complicated things can be easily explained through classical conditioning. Simpler things like, let's just do one more and then we'll go on. Let's think of another example. Okay, really simple thing. When I have horses, whenever I feed them, I whistle so that they know food is coming. So now, after years of doing this, when I whistle, what happens? They all come running from wherever they are, whinnying and making a fuss because they know food is going to be there. I don't have to have any food in my hands for them to do that. All they have to do is hear the whistle. So the whistle originally meant nothing to them, so that means it is a neutral stimulus. Now, what did mean something to them? What did stimulate a response naturally? That is their hay. Okay? That's what horses eat, is hay. And what response was naturally to that? Coming in from the field to eat. Okay? That is the natural response. They're hungry, they want to be fed, they see hay, they're going to come. But over time, the whistle and the hay get associated. When mom whistles, that means I'm going to be fed. And now, what do they respond to? All I have to do is whistle, and they will come running. Okay, and I don't have to have the hay anymore. The hay gets cut out entirely. Okay, and I just whistle, and they come. That is conditioning. Okay, so I gave you some complicated and some simple examples. Hopefully you understand it. If not, post in the discussion board that you're still confused, and I can work through a few more examples with you if you would like. All right, so let's get back into this. Cold coffee. Ugh. Okay, so there's a video. Watch it. I'm not going to go through it. This video is hilarious. So this is operant conditioning. This is a Big Bang Theory video that really explains operant conditioning to you, and it's funny, so definitely watch that. So in this video, well, you can watch the video, but it shows operant conditioning. So this, instead of just learning two things go together, it's specifically behavior and consequences go together. So operant conditioning is the probability of doing a behavior is based on the consequences. So do I get rewarded? I do more. Do I get something that I view as negative? Then I do less of that behavior. And so that's reinforcement and punishment. Reinforcement is increasing the likelihood that this thing will happen again. Punishment is decreasing the likelihood that the behavior will be done. So if your kid sasses you and talks back and you spank them, that's a punishment. You're decreasing the probability that it will happen. If, however, you give in to them and give them what they want, then that will increase the chances that that will happen again. Typically, a reinforcement, something that increases the probability, is nice. It's a pleasant thing, but that's not necessarily the case. Punishment is typically unpleasant, but again, that's not necessarily the case, so keep that in mind as we go along. So here's some examples of reinforcement, increasing the likelihood it will happen again. You're training your dog to sit, you give the dog a treat, or you pat him and say, good dog, then the dog will be more likely to sit on command. Now, this is also what we call a positive reinforcement because you gave something to the dog. You gave him a treat. You gave him a pet. Positive does not mean good, and negative doesn't mean bad. Positive means adding something. It's mathematical. Adding something. Negative means taking something away. Here's a negative reinforcement. Let's say you're my employee, you do a great job at work, and I say, you know what, don't even come into work tomorrow, take the day off, go do whatever you want. You don't have to do your work because you did such an amazing job this past week. Reinforcement, because what are you trying to increase the probability? That this worker will continue or increase his work ethic, how well he's doing and how much money he's bringing into you as the boss. Why is it negative? Because you took something away. Obviously, a vacation, not having to come into work, is a great thing. But in this case, it's negative because you're subtracting something. So it's a negative sign, addition sign. It's not good and bad. Hopefully that makes sense. Positive punishment. Now, it's punishment because this kid was rude to their teacher, and mom's trying to, or dad, whatever, is trying to decrease the likelihood that the kid will be rude to the teacher. Why is it positive? CPS wouldn't think it was positive, but it's positive because he had to do something additional to his regular life. He had to go out to the street and hold up this stupid sign, so it is positive. Not positive because I think it's a good way to punish your kid. Positive because it's addition. Negative punishment. This kid is, I don't know, jumping off the table like Superman. Time out. So I'm taking away your freedom. So decreasing the bad behavior, subtracting freedom from the kid's life. You don't get to do what you want to do. I'm taking that away from you. So it's negative punishment. And this is just bad parenting. All right, so let's go through an example that I see a lot in couples therapy. So you have this couple come into therapy and they're having issues in their marriage. This is what I often see. The wife wants the same attention she was getting when they were dating, and the husband's busy, job, whatever, and the attention you get after marriage tends to decrease, which, by the way, is why your mother tells you things will only get worse after marriage, so make sure it's good while you're dating. If it's not great while you're dating, then it's going to suck after marriage, okay? Keep that in mind. Good rule of thumb there. So the husband's ignoring the wife. He's got a baseball game on, whatever. What is this, negative or positive? Well, he's taking away attention, so it is negative. Now, is it punishment or reinforcement? That's kind of tricky because initially in this cycle, it's not really done on purpose, so he doesn't have a goal of punishing or reinforcing. So what happens when a wife gets ignored? Let's be honest, ladies, you start to nag him, right? We all do it. So, you never take me out anymore. Don't you love me? Do you not care about me? Why don't we do anything? You're always watching that stupid baseball game or hanging out with your friends. So in this case, what is the nagging? Is it negative or positive? Now, I don't mean do you like it or do you not like it. I mean, is it addition or subtraction? So she is adding something he doesn't like, but she's adding something to his life. So that makes it positive. Not that it's good or pleasant or whatever, but it's an addition. It's positive. Is it punishment or reinforcement? Okay, this is the tricky thing. Is her goal to increase his behavior of ignoring her or to decrease his behavior of ignoring her? Obviously, she wants to decrease. So she is punishing him. So she's doing a positive punishment. So what is his response? Guys, what do you do when you get nagged? You pull away and ignore even more. So now husband pulls away and the wife feels more lonely. So what is his goal? Is he doing negative or positive? Well, he's taking away attention. He's subtracting attention, so therefore it is negative. And is it punishment or reinforcement? Is he trying to increase her nagging or decrease her nagging? Obviously, he's trying to decrease it, so that is punishment. So he's doing a negative punishment. But here's where it becomes tricky. In her mind, what is it? And let's go back to this one first. When she nags him, she's doing a positive punishment. But is it going to decrease his ignoring or increase it? It's actually going to increase it. So for him, it actually becomes a positive reinforcement. Right? Okay, tricky. So this is why they pay me for couples therapy, because we often think we're doing something, but it comes across differently to the person. So it's more important in how the organism views the consequence than it is how you meant the consequence to come across. So, for instance, if your preschooler throws a temper tantrum and you give them attention, that may actually reinforce it by you saying, oh, you need to stop, you need to quit. Even yelling at your kid could be reinforcing bad behavior because what they wanted in the first place was attention. So anyhow, she nags him. It's actually, even though she's trying to punish, it's going to reinforce. It's going to reinforce the husband ignoring, which wasn't her intention. Now, when he pulls away, is it going to... Now, obviously, he wants to punish, he wants to decrease nagging, but is it going to actually decrease it, or is it going to be a reinforcer and increase the nagging? Ladies, we all know the answer, and if you have a girlfriend or a wife, you know the answer too. She's going to be reinforced. She's going to nag even more, and more, and more. Okay? And then it's a reinforcer to him too. He's pulling away even more. He's ignoring even more. You get this polarization, which is then when, somebody has an affair or they want a divorce or whatever, and they come in and see me. Because we're doing a good job coming up with consequences and punishments and reinforcements, but we're using them backwards because we don't realize how it works with the opposite sex. Okay? So now, of course, they've got all sorts of issues, and let's say the husband gets a great idea. He realizes 11th commandment, happy wife, happy life, so he starts doing the things that she wants. He's home for dinner, he takes out the trash, he says, I'll fix the car instead of you doing it in your little black dress, whatever. So now what is he doing? Is this behavior negative or positive? Is he subtracting or adding? He's adding, so it's positive. And, think this through. What is his goal in this? Is his goal to increase the nagging or decrease it? He's trying to decrease it, which makes this a punishment. He's actually punishing her. I know we always think punishments are terrible things, but not necessarily. Punishment is simply the goal. I'm trying to decrease a behavior. I want her to nag me less. I do things. I add something. I do a positive. In order to get her to stop doing it, get her to knock her crap off. So it is a positive punishment. He's not trying to reinforce. Reinforcement means he wants the nagging to increase. He's trying to punish. So he's doing it in a very effective positive punishment. Okay? So now everybody's happy. All right, I hope that makes sense. Let me just go through this. So you have positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, negative punishment. Okay? Positive and negative simply means addition and subtraction. Okay? It does not mean good. Does not mean good and bad. Okay? Cross that out. It does not mean good or bad. It is mathematical. It is not values. It's not this is great or this is terrible. It is addition and subtraction. Adding something, subtracting something. Okay? Reinforcement. Let's do this right there now. Reinforcement means increasing the behavior. Punishment simply means decreasing the behavior. Okay? So this is how you do it. Okay? This is your goal. So how are you going to do the behavior? Okay? And what the point is, how are you going to do the consequence? By adding something or taking something away. And what is your goal? Why are you adding something or taking something away? So I am adding something in order to increase the behavior, adding something to decrease behavior, or I'm taking something away in order to increase or decrease a behavior. Okay? Again, hope that makes sense. If not, post in the discussion board. All right, so moving along. So we also have social learning theory, which is just basically I learn through my social relationships. I learn how to think. I'm trained in critical thinking or not trained in critical thinking. I learn how to view the certain races. I learn how to view certain jobs. I learn what things are valued in society, what things aren't valued in society. So you learn a lot. Most of what you learn is through social learning. Albert Bandura was the big name in social learning. And he did the Bobo doll study, which, watch that, it's really important. It's a classic psychological experiment. if you go on in psychology and you don't know what the Pavlov study is, then other psychologists will, they won't like you. So read that, but that's or watch that. That's observational learning. So I'm learning through observing other people. Now, Bandura found that there are certain things that enhance or detract from the effectiveness of observational learning. So if you see somebody do something and they get praised for it, like, good job, here's a trophy, you're promoted or hired or whatever, then you're more likely to do what you saw that person doing. If they're punished for that behavior, you're less likely to do it. So let's say, so I just came back from Denmark, and in Denmark's weird because they consider themselves Christian, but they really act like they're atheists. And I do make that a blanket statement because I did not meet anybody in Denmark that wasn't like that. I'm sure there are some people, but I did not meet any of them. So that's a really common weird thing. So if you go to Denmark and you're like hardcore, believe in God, very faithful person, then people will really look at you like you're crazy and they'll have less respect for you. And so you're maybe less likely to be vocal about that. You're not going to be as open about it. Whereas if you're in America, like, somebody might disagree with you being Christian. They might not believe that that's right or whatever. They may not have the same faith you have, but I don't think any of us mind or even think negatively about somebody who goes around and says, oh yeah, I believe in God and I'm a Christian. I mean, there's always a little bit of negativity about, well, everything. But I think overall we're very accepting of that. So you're much more likely to talk openly about your religious faith here in America. And really, I shouldn't just say Christianity. Any religious faith, it's part of the American culture, right? You should be able to believe what you believe without people attacking you for it. Whereas in Denmark, people are going to think you're an idiot for believing anything, which I think is really strange. Especially because they all, like, they actually have a state religion. Their government is Christian, whereas in America we have a separation of church and state. Our government does not subscribe to any one religion. So anyhow, weird. But the point is, you see other people punished for talking about their beliefs in Denmark, you're much less likely to talk about it. Whereas in America, we sort of admire people, I think, in general, who have strong values, even if we don't believe in them. It's great that at least you have strong beliefs. And so you're more praised for talking about it. You're more likely to talk about it because you see other people talk about it without any issues. I hope that makes sense. I kind of rambled there. So anyhow, we imitate people who are rewarded. If you see somebody in business cheat and they get a promotion, you're more likely to cheat. Now, it's not that simple. Obviously, we have our own ability to think. That's cognitive learning, which we'll talk about next. We can think things through, and we take more into account than simply what we see. But vicarious reinforcement and vicarious punishment are certainly influencers. Now, also, the model is going to influence us. So the better looking the person is, if they're male, for most areas, being male is more influential, being good looking is more influential. Having an English accent is more influential. If you have a Southern accent, you're less influential. I don't know, it's weird. And that's only for Americans, not necessarily for all cultures. Americans think if you have an English accent, you're automatically smart and capable. And I spent 2 weeks in England over the summer. It's not the case for everybody, but it is how we think. It's just weird. So there's certain things that make models more role models than others. All right. Anyhow, so cognitive theory, I talked about this, is we think through our own, we do our own thinking about things. We're not simply victims of our environment. We have the ability to think. So Piaget said that intelligence is our ability to adapt to a new environment. So how well can you adjust when changes occur to the environment that you live in? Piaget also said that we construct our own environment. So we we make our own understanding through our experiences, and we alter our experiences so that we can understand the world around us more. We do experiments, even as little children, we experiment. We see, like, how will mom react to this, or what if I do something else, so that we can understand our world more. So we are active constructors of our own experience. So this is, remember the different areas of theories that I said every theory would touch, so passive versus active development. Piaget very much said that we are active in our personal development. He also had an interactionist view, which said it is nature and nurture that are affecting us. So it is our biological maturation, the unfolding of our genetic destiny, but it's also experience in life, that it's nature and nurture that help us to grow and develop and think. And one of the big things he said is that children are qualitatively different at each stage. So we're going to talk about this more in another chapter, in the cognition chapter. But basically, he said there are 4 stages. There's actually 5, but the 5th one, not everybody hits. So that's why you generally see it say 4. So sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete operations, and formal operational thinking. And then there's post-formal operations. But these are all just different stages that a child will go through as they explore the world. So sensory motor, they're exploring the world through their senses and their motor abilities, movement. Pre-operational is they're starting to develop thinking skills. They have pretend play and fantasy. They still believe in Santa and so on, but they're not. Their logic has not developed. Concrete operational stage is the school-age kids. They're very logical. They have a great ability to think and solve problems, but they're stuck in the real world. And then formal operational, teenage years, we start to use that logic with abstract and hypothetical thinking. So, for instance, one of my high school teachers gave us a paper of how would the world be different if our knees bent in the other direction. Like, chairs would be built differently, and cars would be driven differently. So, abstract. Obviously, it's not possible, but we can still think about it in a logical way. That's formal operational. So a few other ones, Vygotsky and Gottlieb. Vygotsky said that our social and cultural influence is also important to learning. So we learn by interacting with other people, sort of similar to social learning theory, but also that culture is part of it. So, for instance, if you were in North Korea where free thinking is discouraged, you would not develop very good thinking skills. You would not learn, you wouldn't be able to think past a certain level, because thinking is very much controlled and punished. Like, if you talk bad about the North Korean government, chances are not only that you will be arrested and tortured and killed, but your children, your grandchildren, your parents, your grandparents, 3 generations of people are going to be arrested and they'll all be tortured and killed. So you better not even think. Gottlieb talked about epigenetics. So this is the interaction of environment and nature. So we used to believe that genetics was destiny. The genes that you're born with, the DNA that you have, that's what you have. There's nothing that can change that besides maybe like a radical mutation, like you're exposed to radiation, and then you get cancer and die. However, we have learned that there is a genetic system on top of our DNA. So we call it the epigenetics. And the epigenetics controls what is activated in your DNA. So for instance, I did a 23andMe and I have the DNA for red hair, which I'm very upset that was not activated and I don't have a redhead phenotype. I'd love to have red hair. But I do have the DNA for it, so maybe my kids would have red hair, or my grandkids, or whatever. However, there are certain genes that you can turn on, and maybe if I could figure out how to manipulate my epigenetics, I could turn on red hair and change my hair red. Theoretically, that's totally possible. But more likely is I don't eat my vegetables, I smoke, I'm stressed out, and that changes my DNA to turn on a cancer gene, and I give myself cancer. So that's what epigenetics is. If you change your lifestyle so that you're eating vegetables, you stop smoking, you de-stress, you pray, meditate, whatever things you could do, that those things will switch your DNA off. It'll change your epigenetics, so it switches those genes for cancer off, and now you're less likely to get cancer, or completely unlikely to get cancer. Okay, so that's epigenetics. There is a video on that. Watch it, because I'm sure I'm not explaining it as well as the video is, considering that it is a Nobel Prize winner, I think, that teaches that. So anyhow, yeah, watch. I'm not going to explain all this. Watch the video. It is a really good video. You'll totally understand epigenetics by the time you finish that. Okay, so that is the theories chapter. It is just a brief overview of the various theories. There are a lot more theories, but these are the most famous ones. You have to know these in psychology, or you just get no respect as a psychologist. So know these theories, understand how they're all affecting our development, and yeah, so that is chapter 2. Okay, if you have any questions, then post it on the discussion board, and make sure you do your own discussion board that is about this chapter. And yeah, good luck, have fun.